That was wonderful. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Central. My name is Aaron, and I'm the teaching pastor here. It's our pleasure to have Peter Rollins here this morning. This is actually, I think, the 6th time we've had Peter come and speak at Central. We've only been in this location since September, so it's at our old building, which we sold in Glendale for the better, let me just say. But he's been a huge influence on me over the years and been a bit of a mentor as well. And I know that you're here today because Peter Rollins and his work has left a big mark on your life and has been a source of, I don't know, do we want to say light? Or darkness, I guess that's good too, right? That works. But I just want to say thank you for being here today and tell you just quickly a little bit about us and the community that we have here at Central. Central is a healing and inclusive community for those hurt by religion and seeking the Savior. We gather here weekly to discuss challenging topics, reflect over progressive Christian liturgy, commune over food and drink, and serve our neighbors. And if that appeals to you, please come out and check us out on a Sunday morning here in this space at 10:15, or join us for drinks on a Wednesday night for what we call Brew Church, or join us for dinner at the end of every month, the last Sunday of every month. We buy everybody dinner at a local restaurant. Now I'm scared, I'm telling a group of 50 people. Selling your building has its perks. But that's us in a quick little nutshell. There's many ways to participate in community for folks like us, and it looks different than attending church on Sunday mornings, right? But you're here, and it's Sunday morning, and I guess this is church for us now, heretics as we are, I guess. But anyway, with that being said, Peter Rollins, the illustrious Peter Rollins, welcome.
Usually I have somebody to do this stuff. I thought it was beyond that. Oh, very good. There's 2 microphones. Hello, how's it going? I pulled into this church, but it was just behind here. And as I was walking into the church, it was like 100% black. And I was like, this church has changed a bit since I was last here. So I realized I was completely in the wrong one. But yes, not a hipster in sight, not a white pale hipster, but no, I found you. All the hipsters are here, so I'm in the right spot, I think. Also, this is the church that I met my podcast partner and friend Elliot Morgan. If you've listened to the Fundamentalists ever, I think it was the first time I spoke in Avenue, and that's where we met, and then we became housemates and did the podcast. We haven't done it for a long time, unfortunately, but it will come back. So I've got a lot of fond memories of this place. Now, what I want to do is, I want to talk about the joke of Christianity. So that's kind of the theme. And then I want to talk about what kind of social bond is created out of that joke. And this is kind of where my work is at the moment. I'm only just touching on this stuff. If you're interested, there's lots of free material online because we can't cover everything. But I'm going to try and at least get to what I think is the core of an interesting part of this kind of Christian narrative, and as I say, what kind of collective grows out of it. To start with, I want to tell a parable, and this is a parable that I would tell. It's one of the first parables I ever told. I've been going back to some of the old ones that I started telling 30 years ago, and it's interesting because most of us. This is an aside. This is the aside to the aside. I do a lot of that, but. In talks, often someone is like, I have a point, and I need to find different ways of making the same point. So you have a signifier and a signified. So the signified is meaning, and the signifier is really the vehicle for the meaning. So you've got the signified, you've got your meaning, and as I say, you're preaching every week, so you try to find different metaphors, analogies, and stories. But there's also an interesting thing that you see in arts, and in religion, and in countries as well, where what's important is the signifier. And the signified is actually less important. The meaning is less important than the signifier. So, for example, a great piece of art right? Regular art that you can just look at and cast to one side, that's okay, but a great piece of art stays the same. When you go to buy a piece of art, you have to think to yourself, could I live with it? Right? That's one of the questions you ask, which means, is that something that I could look at every day for the next 20, 30 years, and it would still speak to me? And what happens there is your signification, what the art means, that changes and develops over time, and it might actually even invert and become its opposite. But what joins you to other art lovers is not that you have the same signification, but that you enjoy the same signifier. It's the same with parables. You don't try and find new parables. A great parable feels evergreen. And what joins people together is the love of the parable. But actually, you might have radically different ways of interpreting it. And also, over time, you might come back to it and interpret it in different ways. Similar in a country, you might have signifiers like democracy. And people understand what that means differently. But you're unified by using the same word. And even to take religion, a reformation can be understood as what happens when you keep the same signifiers, but the signification radically changes. That's the Reformation. So in Christianity, for example, you have all these different churches, all these different beliefs over time and also at any given moment that use words like crucifixion, resurrection, redemption, creation, whatever it is, these words. And it's actually those words that join you together with this tradition. Not what it means, because if you look back at Christian tradition and history, you go, oh my goodness, people understand what salvation means in very, very different ways. But the signifier stays the same. All of that is my excuse for telling the same stories. that's my sophisticated way of saying I'm going to tell a story that probably most of you have heard me tell. But when I told it initially, I took a very different meaning from it than what I do now. So, simple story, it's three guys, this mystic, this evangelical pastor, and this fundamentalist. And they all died on the same day, and they all go to heaven. And as we all know, you have to get an interview with Jesus before you get into heaven, right? So, Mark 6:17, chapter 17. And so they're all sitting there in the waiting rooms, and Peter comes out, welcomes them all, says hi, shakes their hands, all very nice, just like coming into a wee place like this. You get a hug and a cup of coffee and a donut, and they're all sitting there. And he says, okay, Jesus is ready to see you, right? So he points to the mystic. This little guy says, right, you first. So the mystic goes into this interview room, the little signs turn around, and the mystic's in there only for about half an hour. And then he comes out, and he's laughing, he's shaking his high head, and he goes, I knew I was wrong, and walks into heaven. Next, it's the evangelical pastor's turn. He gets up, goes into the room, little meeting signs turn to in session. And he's in there for about 2 hours. And the door flies open and he comes out and he's like, how could I have been so wrong? Distraught. Then walks on it. Finally, it's the fundamentalist turn. He's got his Bible all underlined, lots of different highlighters and little pieces of paper hanging out of it. And he goes into the interview room, the signs turned around, and he's in there for what must be like 6 hours. And then finally the door swings open and Jesus comes out and goes, how could I have been so wrong? And I love that little story. And on a surface level, right, we're all supposed to identify with the mystic. Right? We read that story, the fundamentalist, all of that, and the mystic's the one who knows he's wrong and goes into heaven. And that's a great reading of the text, of the parable. But over time, I've come to think that it's the fundamentalist who's right, despite himself. And that's what I want to talk about today. I think this is the nature of salvation. This is the nature of emancipation. It's the joke. Now, if you disagree, that's fine. I don't mind you being wrong. No, it's okay. I disagree with myself, and you only have to listen to me for half an hour, whereas I have to live with this, so count yourself blessed. But this is, in a nutshell, a really interesting move that I think happens within religion in its advanced forms. So, what happens is, I'm going to talk about 3 types of unknowing. I'm going to talk about the weak, epistemological unknowing, strong, epistemological unknowing, and ontological unknowing. And I'm going to reference these in relation to each of the three figures in this parable. So we're going to start with the evangelical pastor. And I'm going to say that he represents weak epistemological unknowing. And what I simply mean by that is he realizes he's wrong. How could I have been so wrong? In that phrase, how could I be so wrong? There is this idea that, I could have got it right. So contingently, maybe I didn't read the right books, maybe I didn't think enough, maybe I didn't engage with the right people, I was born in the wrong place, got the wrong religion, whatever. It's like, I'm not right, but there's a sense in which I could be, right? If you're that one of those people who takes notes, and none of you are doing that, thank you, lack of respect, thank you very much. But if any of you were taking notes, you might be taking notes because you're going like, if I take enough notes of these things, maybe I can get the right answer, I can know the right answer, right? So that's weak epistemological unknowing, that's totally fine. That's why we watch videos on YouTube and read books, because there's things we don't know, but we can know if we apply ourselves. The mystic describes what I would call here strong epistemological unknowing. And what that means is not that I don't know, but that none of us do. That there's something about this name God that describes something that cannot be understood. Not just like, if we put enough effort into it, we can get understanding, but the word itself signifies something that cannot be signified. That's actually one of the earliest definitions of God, sophisticated definitions of God. Anselm uses it. In Proslogion, he basically says, God is the word we give to something we can't name. It's the name we give to what we cannot name. Very interesting definition of God. So by definition, this God is what's often called a master signifier. It's something that you don't name, but it generates stuff. So in the impossibility of naming God, all of this language, all of these books, all of this discourse happens. And interestingly, as I say, it's around this signifier that we're unified. We all disagree about what it quite means, and we're thinking about it in different ways, but we're unified by this signifier that names an impossibility, a limit to our knowledge. And that's kind of apophatic theology, right? And that's mystical stuff, and that's brilliant. I think that's probably where I was in my first book, actually, largely this mystical understanding where we need a name for something we cannot name. That's a beautiful thing, to have a space where we are overwhelmed by unknowing. And the mystics would say things like, it's like we're a ship sunken in the depths of the ocean. The ocean contains the ship, and the ship contains the ocean. But while the ocean contains all of the ship contains but a fragment of the ocean. So it's like looking at the sun and going blind, what's called a saturated phenomenon. It's you don't know not because of a lack. That's the evangelical, like if I read enough, if I did enough, maybe I would get the answer. It's you don't know because of an excess. Something has overwhelmed you that you cannot conceptualize, that short circuits you, that blows your mind, right? So in this reading, God is not only unable to be conceptualized, God can't be experienced. God can only be counter-experienced, which is a form of experience in which you're kind of short-circuited. It's where you're overwhelmed, where you cannot kind of grasp what's going on. We could talk about that, but that's not the main thing, because I want to get onto the third, which is even more interesting, I think. Because in the apophatic, God knows everything, right? We just don't. God, as Søren Kierkegaard would say, God has the blueprint, but we don't know it. There's a limit to our understanding because we're creatures of language and all of that. But if we were God, we would know. Now, the fundamentalist, this is interesting. The fundamentalist is obviously certain about what they believe. They're there, they go into the interview room, they're sitting down, and they know the answer, they have it. And they're interrogating, like the kid who says, why to the parent, and the parent gives answer after answer after answer until they can't give an answer, and they just go, shut up and do your homework, right? There's a point where the why hits a limit, and you can't go any further. So the fundamentalist is having this back and forth. And what does the fundamentalist encounter? Fundamentalist in that moment encounters that Jesus doesn't know. Now, if we imagine in this story, if it was a movie and we're in this cinematic universe of the fundamentalists, we can understand that that would be a traumatic experience. So we imagine the fundamentalist is in there, he's questioning Jesus, they're talking, and then Jesus says, how could I have been so wrong? That would be a disturbing experience. It would be a disruptive experience. But also potentially, this gets us to the emancipatory heart of Christianity. It is potentially referencing a deep truth. And what is that truth? Well, to be human, and Pascal is beautiful on this. He's very good at showing how we all feel that we're lacking, right? So to be a human is to experience a sense of not having something. There's something that's missing. And that's experienced in two major ways. In our bodily enjoyments and in our language, in our mind and matter, body and mind. And there's a great, I love this joke. It's about this little German baby who's adopted by this British family, right? And baby seems totally fine, but never speaks, never says a word, right? 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, never speaks. And then one day, they're 6 years old, they're sitting at dinner, they're having some food, and little Hans says, "This soup is rather tepid." Just out of nowhere. "No, the soup is rather tepid." And everybody freaks out. They're like, little Hans, you know, you're 6 years old, you've never said a word, you've never said anything. What's going on? And little Hans says, "Up until now, everything has been satisfactory." Right? and it's, you know, because in a way, language arises because of a failure, because things aren't satisfactory. This happened when I was a kid. I didn't start speaking until I was a lot older than most people. I think I was really old before I started speaking. And the speech therapist realized that my sister was getting me everything when I pointed at stuff, and said to my mum, "Would you get your daughter to stop doing things for Peter?" And as soon as she stopped, then I had to start speaking. "Okay, give me some cookies," right? In a way, we speak because not just to communicate something, but also there's always a failure to communicate. That's why when you give a talk like this, I try to say everything, and then I come away and say, I didn't quite get it right, so I have to speak again. If I could say it all, then I would just walk away, right? I could write a book and it was all there, but every time you try and say something, it's missing. You can never fully communicate. There's always something that slips out that can't be grasped. And in our lives, desire is the affect that arises because you feel you're missing something. I could get a better job, I could be in another relationship, I could be out of the relationship, I could have money, whatever it is. Desire is an affect that says you feel you lack. So as we speak and as we desire, these are evidences that we are not, walking around whole and complete. There's something we feel is missing. Now, there's basically two ways in which this is dealt with, right? There's a few more, but there's, I suppose I'll talk like this. There's religions of hedonism that say you can fulfill your desire, and there's religions of nihilism that say get rid of your desire, right? Those are two attempts to find a solution to this dissatisfaction of being. You can satisfy your desire, or you can get rid of your desire. And LA has both up to 11. Because they're both really connected. So, you've got this is a place where if you have enough money, you look good enough, there's a promise of wholeness and completeness just permeating this place, this promise of completeness. And at the same time, lots of spiritual practices where you go away and you try to get rid of your desire. Because in one sense, one fails, and so you do the other, and then that allows you to go back to that, and you kind of maybe oscillate between the two. So in this idea is we try to get rid of this sense of dissatisfaction that we have. And traditionally you've got like two visions for this. One is God is whole and complete, but we're not. And that's the way it is, and maybe when we get to heaven it will be different, but in this life we have to deal with that. God's whole and complete and we're not. Think of feudalism, where you're all in a similar village. Nobody is going to get any better than anybody else. No one's getting the Maserati. No one's getting the mountain on the hill. There's the Lord and the lady up there. They've got it all. We're all in the dirt together. This, by the way, creates real social solidarity, because when you're with the other and we're all in the dirt together, there's less jealousies and envies. You grow up in the same village, you die in the same village, and then eventually, you overwhelm the lord and the lady or whatever. But there's a sense in which we're all lacking. That's kind of feudalism. The contemporary age that we live in is the idea that the big other, or God, or whatever, is not lacking, and we don't have to lack either. So in contemporary society, there's this idea of seize the day, be an entrepreneur of the self. You can be all that you can be. You can have the Maserati. You can have the thing that will make you whole and complete. And you're surrounded by images of people who seem to have that. Right? This generates a fragmentation of social solidarity, because there's jealousies and envy start to arise because you're surrounded by all these people who seem to lack the lack. Right? So in the first, we all lack, but there's some other who doesn't. In this other vision, there's a way of becoming like the big other, of lacking the lack. We can all do that, which creates so much anxiety, burnout, fatigue in this message of, this is why Lacan says, in a way, the superegoic conjunction at its core is a voice that says enjoy. It says enjoy, it says be out more, be happier, be good. Like, you're condemned not by this voice that says you should be nicer to your mum. You're actually more condemned by thinking, I'm not having enough fun, enough sex, enough relationships, enough whatever. You're condemned by fear of missing out. This feels like, and that again, we all, I think, can feel that sense. So what's the third possibility? The third possibility is that you're lacking, and so is the absolute. And this is what this third position looks like. And this brings us to the joke of Christianity. Now, it's a joke, not so much because it's funny, it kind of is funny, it's relieving, but a joke has a logic in which, basically any joke works because it brings you in one direction and then counterintuitively, throws you, right? It kind of surprises you with a truth that is completely what you didn't expect. So philosopher Zizek talks about the joke of Christianity like this. He says, imagine someone goes into a church and they are distraught and they are crying and they pray and they say, I want to be one with you, but I am lonely and I am lost and I am in despair. What should I do? And then this person hears the voice of God saying, my child, now in your despair, and in your alienation and in your loneliness, there you're one with me. Right? So it's interesting because you come here to, in a sense, get the thing that will get rid of your lack. And yet, what you get in a space like this is your lack redoubled back to yourself, where the absolute says, I know what it's like. I have alienation as well. So whenever Christ says, I don't know, this is a way of saying that there is a type of asymmetry or non-deterministic kernel to reality itself. And we can look at that in various ways in biology and physics and chemistry and in politics. In politics, the non-at-oneness of the social body that creates civilization. In biology, the non-at-oneness of the organism that generates life, evolution. In physics, the we have particle duality, the asymmetry of particles that generates reality, right? That crunches into reality. All these different ways of saying it. In mathematics, Gödel's incompleteness theory, and a contradiction at the heart of mathematics that generates mathematics, etc., etc. But you could say that in Christianity, my God, why have you forsaken me? Is that writ large? The idea that you're identifying with an alienated Christ. Christ crucified, who experiences this fundamental anxiety and lack. And it's weird because this is so not what you want, right? It's like when you go to psychoanalysis and you want the person to help you to get rid of your symptoms, to bring that person back that you lost. And then over time you realize the analyst can't do that, and you have to live with that suffering. You have to live with that pain. If the analyst told you that at the beginning, you wouldn't go, because you go, I'm not going to waste my money. Go out and do retail therapy. I'm going to waste my money for you to tell me there is no cure, right? So the analyst doesn't do that. In one sense, you're there because you believe that you can get rid of the lack. And then the emancipatory moment is when you realize, hold on, we're all lacking. There is a wound to being human. There is the traumas that happen to you, and they're all different. Some of those are worse than others. But even if you've had the perfect life, there is the wound that is you. So there's the traumas that happen to you, and there is the trauma that is you. The trauma that is being itself. By the way, if I forget to mention why I put these pencils down, you have to remind me to say, because otherwise you'll not know why those are there. And I will forget, because I'm really bad at that. So, where was I? Oh yes, alienation. Oh yes, so there's this experience where at first you go, I don't want to know that the other is alienated as well. I want the other to make me whole. Just like in dating apps, you want to find someone who completes you, makes you whole and complete. You don't want someone who's just as broken and rubbish as you. That sounds awful, right? So you want someone who'll fill the lack, make you complete. But love arises precisely when you encounter and realize, well, the other is lacking just like you. And there's something actually, this is the joke, because that's counterintuitive. You think realizing that would be horrible. And yet, realizing that somehow brings relief. Like in a joke, the laughter, the relief of the laughter, there's like this, oh. Like I remember with Rob Bell, many of you know, I bet you loads of you know my work through him. Annoyingly, no one knows his work through me, but this is the other. But I remember, I first meet Rob, and he's selling all these books. He's got this great life, and I'm going, oh, I'm so happy for you, Rob. These are tears of joy. Like I'm really happy because life is working out so well for you. I mean, my book, oh yeah, it's sold a few dozen. I don't care. It's not about the numbers. It's never about the numbers till you have them. It's not about the numbers. But then I'm talking to him, and I realize, oh, he's also struggling with things. He burnt out. We just did a podcast, which hopefully will come out next week. Listen, he talks about being burnt out at the height of his success, where he went to the doctor and said, your adrenaline's burnt out. There's certain areas of your brain that are just fried. This was not at the height of his despair. This is the height of seemingly the success, and had to drop out, had to disappear from this. I mean, some of you have heard me say, I think I said this last time I was in LA, some of you were there, but I feel like, life is like a party, and in LA especially, there's a party going and everybody's having a good time, and you can pretend you're having fun, but it's always good to have a place where you can go and be miserable, right? It's the bathroom. You go to the bathroom and after you cry, right? And then you go back out and you pretend you're happy, right? But in LA, you can't do that, because even the bathroom, they're all doing Molly, right? There's nowhere you can go to escape the tyranny of happiness, right? You can nowhere to go to just be miserable. And this is miserable anonymous, right? It's great to be free to pursue your happiness, but we also need freedom from the pursuit of happiness, right? And that's a much more radical in a way. And secretly, this is just for an hour, that we can be freed from the pursuit of happiness. God, we can be miserable together. And the weird thing is, at precisely that moment, you find you're less miserable. Whenever Rob tells me about the struggles he was having, it actually makes me feel lighter. Somehow, not him being great and wonderful, and maybe he'll make me great and wonderful. The moment when he is able to share his vulnerability, his lack, my lack becomes easier to bear. The load is lightened. It's robbed of its sting. And so this emancipatory moment where you go in to, say, church, and you go, I want to get rid of this lack. And then you're confronted with going, you know what? Lack and unknowing and ambiguity and impossibility and struggle is woven into the very fabric of everything. If you got rid of that, you wouldn't be happy. You'd be a zombie. Like here's an example. Because this is a symptom, by the way. If we're all lacking, let's just do an if this is true, that we're all wounded by being, that to become a subject is to kind of feel yourself losing something, right? And by the way, one of the things they talk about in some forms of analysis is the first separation is with, say, the mother-other, where you feel, oh, I'm no longer my mother's womb, or my mother's breast. I'm no longer contained by that oneness. So it's not really possible to talk about a mother without the child, or the child without the mother. They're so fused in a sense. But then this alienation occurs, and the infant feels themselves separate. Now, it's not that they lost oneness. They came into being through it. There's no I without thou, no inside without outside. So your very coming into being is being marked by a loss. And then one way of overcoming that experience is not to reunite with the mother-other, That's a failed strategy, a strategy that is technically called perversion. It's a failed strategy. What you discover is you can't reconcile with the mother other because they're not reconciled with themselves. You know, that song that James sang, which I love, Separated from Yourself. It's a beautiful song. But it's like, oh, I can't make the other complete because they've got multiple desires. They're caught up in various different, they don't even know what they want. And so now I'm bound together not by a shared identity, but by a shared sense of we're both lacking. We're both lacking together. That's where the social bond is. That's where the connection is. So with all of that, so with what a symptom is I keep want to get this, a symptom is the shape that your lack takes. So, you know, maybe a symptom is you always throw yourself into chaotic situations. You're always in chaos and need to be rescued, right? One way of thinking about that, the reason why that's a symptom potentially is a symptom is something that overwhelms you. You can't get a hold of, even if you're aware of it. It seems to be something that is almost a machine that's going on in your life. You can't get a grip of it. And there's, in psychoanalysis, the idea that you get some enjoyment out of it, but also some suffering. So in this situation, someone's like, I always find myself in chaos, in chaotic situations. It's a symptom that keeps repeating in their lives. And then maybe, as I talk to them, I realize, oh, when they were young, the only way they felt love is when they were in a chaotic situation. That's when they got the attention of the parent. And so they feel this lack, which we all do because there's that separation. But the shape that took for this person is I throw myself into chaos and I get rescued, and that's how I then feel that love. Now, they've forgotten that. That's another reason I said it's not conscious. They're not conscious of it, but it's plain, it's unconscious. It's a monument to a forgotten truth. So I see that playing out. That's the symptom. Somebody else might always be late. I can't help but be late. I'm always late. I try not to be late. I set my alarm sooner. I do all of the things I have to do, but I'm always late. Maybe when they were young, they felt very alone and isolated, and they thought to themselves, they'd love me if I was gone. If I was dead, then they would care, right? And that's forgotten. But what's playing out potentially is always being late is a way of kind of like removing yourself so that you're more present. Because unconsciously that was the way that you fantasized getting over the alienation. There's lots of different, we all have symptoms, whatever your symptoms are, right? So we have these symptoms, and they touch on a deep truth. And the problem with symptoms is they just don't work. So the person who puts themselves into chaos all the time, well, in a way, it's because they want to get closer. They want to feel love. But by putting themselves into chaos all the time, they actually do the opposite. They push people away. People don't want to be near them. So the problem with the symptom as well is it doesn't really achieve what it's attempting to achieve, right? So we all have these symptoms that are evidence of the shape of the lack that we have. A good example of this is like people say to me, it's true, they go like, Peter could be a good speaker if only he kept to the point, didn't always forget where he was, and kind of like, didn't kind of go off in tangents, right? But no, if I did all of those things, it would be a rubbish talk. What you have now is a rubbish talk and the fantasy that it could be great if only I did those things. Right? That's kind of how the symptom works. The symptom is like the imperfection that actually is enjoyable. And you kind of think, it's an imperfection that you'd like to get rid of. But actually, no, it's imperfection that makes you really interesting and cool. It might be causing you a lot of suffering, so you might want to reposition yourself in a relationship, but we all have these symptoms, and they're what make you interesting. But they are the thing you think, if only I could cut that out, it would be great. But honestly, if you cut this out, it would be a TED Talk. And I think TED Talks are generally rubbish, because TED Talks are like talks ripped of all symptoms. You look at a comedian, right? A comedian uses their symptoms. A comedian has like personality, and because the weirdness that they are is expressed. In TED, they try to get rid of it all, right? In order to make it really clean, and that's why you can never remember who gave a TED Talk. It's boring, right? Even if they're giving good information. So that's a symptom. So basically, up until now, and I've got like 15 minutes or so left. Yeah, good, thank you. what I've been trying to say is we want to overcome our lack. We want something that gets rid of it, either through, you say, getting rid of our desire entirely or fulfilling our desire. But weirdly, in realizing that this lack is woven into the absolute itself and into other people. Thank you so much. It's good to have a little sip. I thought it was going to be a guest, but yes, by realizing that the other lacks, you come to not simply endure your own lack, but also find ways to enjoy it. Find ways to position yourself. So, for example, maybe you're really paranoid, and your symptom is paranoia. You're probably never going to get over paranoia, but you might be a really good journalist, right? Because, if you're going to be a little bit paranoid, there's really good work that you can do. You're not trying to get over the symptom so much as reposition yourself in relation to it. Now, all of this comes to, what does this look like in a social bond? I'm reasonably critical of, I'm not critical of community, right? Community is vital. Communities are vital. Community is a social bond. And a social bond that is forged around shared beliefs, shared identities, shared values, shared obstacles, and shared enemies. So obstacles and or enemies, right? That's what a community is. We develop a community because we all share certain beliefs in common. We all like the same sports, whatever, right? So communities are great. We have these communities. So that's a social bond, as I said, based around shared beliefs, identities, values, obstacles, and or enemies. Then there's the commons. The commons are spaces where you encounter people who are different from you. Not just that you disagree with, but you even disagree about what the disagreement is about. Right? So it's not just disagreement, because that's just possible to reconcile disagreements, but when you actually even disagree about what the disagreement is about, there's a type of irreconcilable knot. And the commons are places like parks and public libraries, places where you might bump into somebody who's actually radically different from yourself. And the commons is increasingly under threat. Even things like Starbucks, I think originally were trying to create that. I think you call it third spaces here, but a space where can you really sit with people who might be radically different from you? Those are two interesting kind of contrasting spaces. The thing that I'm really interested in is what I call communion. And comes from that word, there's a reason for that, but a communion for me is a social bond that is forged around a recognition that we all lack. It's not forged around shared beliefs or practices or values. It's shared around a sense that in a moment I can look you in the eye and I can go, you have the trauma of being as well. You have symptoms as well. They're different from mine, but we all have doubt, unknowing, ambiguity. All of that's going on within our lives. And interesting, that's weird, because that's a social bond, as in you feel connected to the other, but it's not because of some belief. It's because of that shared wound. AA, and I've talked about this before when I was last here, but AA is an example of a communion for me. Because in AA, you're bound together not by shared beliefs, shared class, shared political affiliations, or anything like that. You're brought together because, you have, interestingly, a shared symptom, alcoholism, right? And that is covering over a wound. The wounds are different, but all of you are drinking because of something. And as Freud would say, that alcohol isn't the problem, it's the solution to a problem. You've got to, in some way, find out what that problem is. Because if you don't get to that, right, if you're an alcoholic, that's the solution to a problem, and you, through sheer force of will, stop being an alcoholic, right? You're just going to do something even worse. Take up CrossFit or something like that, right? Because you've changed the thing that you do, right? You drink Diet Coke, that seems a big one, like 100 Diet Cokes a day. I've got friends who do that, right? Because in a way, you've got a different solution. But what you do in AA, in a way, is begin to peel back and look at what is the wound that this has been covering over, this defense mechanism has been covering over. And so it's a type of communion. Right? And what's powerful about that is it's a space of grace. Grace is a name for acceptance, radical acceptance. You don't have to change. One definition of grace that Paul Tillich uses is the acceptance that you're accepted. So I can accept you, but you don't accept that acceptance. Maybe your defenses are still too high. You can't believe that someone would accept you. Narcissism is often a defense against profound self-hatred. When someone is always talking about themselves and their achievements, it's often because they think that's the only reason why they'll be loved. Again, when they were a child, maybe they felt that's the only reason why I'll be loved, is because I've achieved something. All of our symptoms are infantile. They're all like, if you think about whatever your symptom is, start asking yourself, if I was a child, what would that be saying? They're little childish responses to real suffering. Right? It's the symptom. And you begin to, in a space of grace, everyone in the circle in AA is like, they accept you. They're not asking anything of you. What I think can be called step 0, right? We've got the 12 steps, but step 0 is just, you're in a space of grace. Now, maybe you can't accept that for a while, so you stay silent in the circle. You don't say your name, you don't say you're an alcoholic. But eventually there's a point where you can say that, because you know you're not being judged. And not only are you not being judged, you're not in a room of non-alcoholics who don't lack the lack, right? You're in a room of people who accept you and show you grace, knowing the very pain that you're in. So you're accepting, experiencing this grace, not from a non-divided other, but from a divided other. Again, going back to that story, there's something profound about the image of a divided absolute that gives you grace. Not the whole and complete, father who goes, that's okay, right? But rather someone who is also broken, who says, that's okay. So in that space of grace, in that circle, you can begin to talk about why you're drinking. Tell your story. Symbolize it. Put it into language. And as you put it into language, something begins to dissipate. The load becomes slightly lighter to bear. And you don't get rid of it. I love that idea, of those, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I don't hear that as a literal definition. I almost hear that as saying, there's no post-traumatic subject. There's no, that's it. Whenever you talk about this stuff, you're no longer that, I'm free and I'm great. There's a sense in which, no, whatever your defense is, whatever your symptom is, there's no really overly getting over it. But you symbolize it in a space of grace. And what do you feel? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. What I mean by forgiveness is very technical. It's not like, I forgive you. It's like, guilt is the experience in which you go, I have to go from A to B. I'm here and I should be here. And I'm going to, through sheer force of will, get from A to B, right? And guilt is the affect of not getting there, right? The affect of not being who you should be. Whatever it is, guilt is the affect of you live between A and B. How do I get to that next step? In a space of grace, momentarily, for an hour, people are saying, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. You're just accepted for who you are. You don't have to do anything, right? And in that, if you're able to slowly, that penetrates into your being, you experience the dissipation of guilt, which is forgiveness. You go I don't have to do anything. I just can be. And then you move from will to contemplation. Will is what gets you from A to B, pure will, and I'm going to get from A to B. You can begin to contemplate. Contemplation is when you stop doing anything and you begin to go, so why am I like this? Why do I drink? No, I'm going to have to get over the drinking. I sometimes use the example of if you want to write a book and you go, you've got an idea for a book, every time you sit down, your mind goes blank, or you always find ways to avoid writing it, okay? I've got a friend who was going to write this children's book. She had this idea for a children's book, and it was a very well rendered idea, but she never wrote it. Years went past, and she never wrote it. What's going on there? It feels like it's a symptom. There's something, and sheer force of will wasn't enough. It didn't work, no matter how much she forced herself to do it. The change only happened when she said, maybe I don't want to write the book. Maybe there's something in me that is resistant. And she could only do that in a space of grace, of acceptance, and then she was able to contemplate. And in contemplation, things can shift. Weirdly, change can begin to happen precisely when people say, you don't have to change. So, basically, taking this idea of the divided absolute and saying, well, what does that look like for a collective of people? Well, what it means, I think, is how do we create spaces where we can all be honest about our doubts and our unknowing, and our difficulties and our symptoms? How can I generate more grace in myself that when I see you act in some particular way, I don't just get annoyed, but I go, oh, maybe that's a symptom. And it's a symptom of a wound, under the wound of your alienation. And I don't even have to say anything. I can just that acknowledgement makes me get less annoyed at you. Right? I get less annoyed at you. And as I get less annoyed at you, you might experience forgiveness from me. I don't have to say anything or do anything. I just weirdly accept that symptom that you're always late. Go like, yeah, that's okay. And then you're going like, why am I always late? It's precisely in the acceptance that you can contemplate, and maybe a shift and a change can happen. That's a different type of social bond. So in community, the social bond is, as I said, it would be something we share in common, but there's always lack. So if we take this idea that lack is part of this very fabric of the world, then where is it in community? Well, in community, it's always on an outsider, a scapegoat. There's always in a community, if we could get rid of them, everything would be great. Or if we could overcome this obstacle, then everything would be wonderful. Communities, by definition, still have to have lack, but they externalize the lack onto even very basic ways, like, oh, if our team won, that would be wonderful, right? Oh, I wish my team would win. But actually, you don't wish that. You wish your team would win occasionally, but not always. I have to tell you this story very quickly. But I'm in LA, you end up at a dinner party and there's somebody really famous there or whatever. So one day a friend of mine invited me round to a little fire pit, and Bill Maher was there. I have to tell you a story about Bill Maher. And I thought, oh, Bill Maher, I don't, because I'm not from America, I don't know him that well. I know he's a comedian, he's big, and we're talking about this stuff, and I was given a little parable about these very ideas, and he wasn't actually buying it too much. And then I said, well, listen, when I came to America, I'm not into sports at all. So I'm not into sports at all. But I thought I should get into a sport in order to kind of fit in. And so I just picked one. I picked basketball. And I said, I got into basketball. I said, but the problem was my team kept winning. And they won and won and won, and it just got really, really boring. And he was like, well, what was the team? And I said, well, they were called the Harlem Globetrotters. They would sometimes almost lose. These guys called the Generals, but they always won. But you know what he said to me? He said, he didn't laugh, he didn't even crack a smile. He just said, that's not a real team. Oh, that was my big chance to impress Bill Maher. I completely didn't, but I thought it was good, But if your team won all the time, it would drain all the excitement out of it. I've seen sports. I've been with friends. I was with a friend once, and her team was winning, and it was in a bar, and she lost all interest only until the other team started getting close again, and then she took an interest, right? Because that's what's interesting. That's where the enjoyment is, not in the winning. Pascal's brilliant on this. Very quickly, I have to give you this. And Pascal was brilliant because he talks about divertisement. He says divertisement is how we hide from lack. Right? And what is divertisement? He says divertisement is not getting things, right? So you kind of think, oh, well, we hide from this lack by getting objects, by getting stuff, by being successful. Pascal says, no, we don't do that. We're cleverer than that. He says, and he uses the example of a hunt. So he says, imagine you're about to go on a hunt. And I see this and I go like, okay, you know what? I'm going to save you some time. This morning I went out, killed the fox. There it is. You don't have to go out on the hunt, right? And you're like, well, you'd be disappointed. Right? So naively then I go, I get it. You like to be out there running around. That's okay, well go ahead and do it. I mean, the fox is dead, but knock yourselves out, have a blast, right? You'd also be unhappy, right? Where the enjoyment is the right amount of distance from the fox. You have to kind of not get it and not get it. In that sweet spot. And sports are brilliant at this. brilliant at this. Sports are always trying to find teams where closeness, and that's, again, I'm not in the sports, so this could be completely wrong, but I think in lots of sports, think in American football, you have this, like, the worst team in the division gets like the first choice or something, and the next one, however it is. But in other words, you can't have just a bad team. You have to try to get it back. I think in boxing, in horse racing, there might be weights. If a horse is doing too well, they might weight the horse. In other words, sports, they know that it has to be close because the enjoyment is not in the winning. It's not in the losing. It's kind of in that spot in between. And that's what we do when we try to keep that going, to hide from this lack. So, all of that to say, the social bond, I call it communion, because communion is a meal around the death of God. And the death of God is a lack, the ultimate lack. The sense of, we've lost the very bearance of who we are. And we gather together around that loss. And in gathering together and communing around that loss, we find a different way of being in the world. So what I would like to do, I'll tell you what I'm trying to do. I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to do a little experiment. It's a bit of an experiment, but what I'm trying to do is a type of AA where people say their name and say that they lack. Because the thing about AA, which is interesting, is it's universal, but it is around a particular symptom, alcoholism. So what would a universal AA look like? Where we go, well, we all have different symptoms. One's alcoholism, one's being, always in chaos, or whatever. But we all acknowledge that lack. And then we just talk about it. And I see it in you, and you see it in me. The idea is that coming out of that space, I'll feel a little lighter. That's love, by the way. That's what love is. Now, there's different types of love. You could talk about biological love, which is maybe like it kind of sets off hormones and dopamine and serotonin, right? There's biological love. Then there's psychological love, where you like somebody, where you feel really good about them, and you want to be with them, and you would die for them. Maybe that's when you know you love, it's beyond the pleasure principle. You would actually suffer for them. But there's this other type of love. And Soren Kierkegaard talks about it. I've got a friend here who loves this book, Works of Love. Tiana, don't want to embarrass you, but I've started reading it because of you, wherever you are. But this is similar to what Kierkegaard's talking about, which is a type of love that is not biological and not psychological. It's a commitment to seeing the other in their vulnerability, and a commitment to showing your room. You don't have to like the person. You might think they're an asshole. You might whatever. You might just dislike them entirely. But in this space, for example, of an hour where you share your lack, you see theirs, that's the work of love. Said whether or not you like it, whether or not you know it, in that moment where you're bearing witness to their suffering and you're giving the gift of your suffering, in that moment there is love. And you're loving your enemy, you're loving your neighbour. And I say it's not about liking them, but in that space, if you can somehow realise that the other has symptoms, that the other is a human, fragile and broken like you, and maybe they don't know it. So their symptoms are crazy because they can't even acknowledge it themselves. They are so, they're so caught up, say for example, in talking about themselves and this kind of narcissistic thing, they don't even know that they hate themselves. Don't even know it. Right? And you don't have to say it. The worst thing is to say it, because they won't be able to hear it. Direct communication doesn't work. Kierkegaard talks about that. Indirect communication. If I see you being nasty to your parents or something, I don't know who to point to, all of you. And I see you being nasty to your mum, and I say to you, you're really nasty to your mum, you're more likely to go, no, I wasn't. She's a nightmare. She's a mustard. You wouldn't believe what she's like, okay? Because your defenses come up. But if I bring you out for coffee and say, man, you seem really stressed. I'm really worried. It seems really, really difficult time. And I saw when you were chatting with your mum there, you just seemed really caught up. You're more likely to go, yeah, I really acted badly there. I shouldn't have done that. Things have been really tough at the moment. Right? That's indirect communication. I just have to show grace, if I can, and go, are you okay? And then because you know it, but you don't know that you know it. So pointing it out just doesn't work, but somehow creating that space of grace, that space of forgiveness, allows the person to go, oh yeah, no, I do hate myself. I'm always talking about what I've accomplished. Because, you know what, that's the only time I ever felt that I was loved. was whenever I accomplished things. Oh, after that conversation, sometimes that can weaken a bit. It doesn't weaken overnight, it doesn't weaken entirely, but it weakens. That's the work of love. Is a commitment. It's an ethical commitment. It's a courageous commitment to go, whether I like you or not, I will try to be graceful. I'll try to offer that and offer that space. So what I'd like to do, right, experiment here. We're going to close your eyes. You can get comfortable if you want. I don't know, you can't really lie on that. That's not going to be comfortable. And I'm going to do a little kind of experiment of a meditation. This is based on an Irish saying, which is, if we all sat in a circle and threw our troubles into the middle, sure, we'd all take our own troubles back out. And I like this little Irish saying. Irish got so many sayings, but I like that saying because it's almost like once you see everybody's troubles in the middle, one is you go, well, at least they're mine, better the devil you know, and yeah, that's who I am, you know, so in a sense, but it's wonderful to potentially see all the troubles of everybody else in the room. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. The DSS is like a 5-minute kind of slight, small reflection on these ideas. I'm going to sit down as well. Okay, there we go. So I want you, as you close your eyes, I want you to imagine you're in a circle. And in this circle, there are other people that you know. So what I'll do is just let you you almost don't even have to actively put people in that circle, just see who naturally comes up. It might be parents, might be friends, might be a partner, might be somebody who's died. When you're sitting in the circle, these other people are there. Might be somebody you like. There's probably lots of people you don't. Just look around the circle, see who your mind has put there. And as you're looking at these people, you notice that each of them has a backpack of some kind or bag with them. Something that they're carrying. And what I'd like you to do is imagine that the people around the circle take these bags and unzip them or unbutton them or open them. And we're going to take a minute to see what's in the bags. These are people's symptoms, what they're carrying. And I want you to look at what you can see. Some might be very clear, and some you might not see at all. It might be visual, like a food or pet, or it might be an image of chaos or lateness or arrogance. And now you open your own backpack. Begin to look at your own symptom. What do you see? What do you carry? What is that weird anomaly that you can't quite seem to control. In this circle that you're in, just for this moment, there's no judgment. No one's judging you in the circle. Everyone's looking at their own symptom. Everyone's glimpsing their own wound and yours. In this moment, you're accepted. You're loved. You don't need to do anything. Some of the people in the circle might not be aware of their symptoms. Some of them might be. But you're loved. You're accepted. You don't need to change. Just contemplate what is in that bag. What might it say about the shape of your wound? These are little trinkets to your traumas, monuments to a suffering that's lost and forgotten, but remembered in your actions and in your body. When you go back out into the world, you forget about this. Get on with life, try to achieve, try to succeed, try to be what you can be. But right now, you don't need to do anything. You carry these symptoms. They are evidence that you're lacking, that you're struggling in some way. And each of the people in that circle, in glimpsing that, you're loving them, and they are loving you. Okay. And the reason why I gave you the pencil, you didn't have to remind me, I just remembered myself, is a little reminder of this. I like to call it a parable pencil, so never will I lack is what it says, which is where we start off. But I'm not lacking, I want to get rid of it, I'm going to cheat, I'll be everything I can be. And as you use the pencil, eventually it will say, will I lack? Which is more questioning and struggle, and is there lack and will I lack? And as you get older, you use the pencil a little bit more, there's acceptance. I lack. And finally, just lack itself. The embrace of lack that we all share, not just that I lack, but that we lack together. And it's somehow in that embrace we find emancipation. So, little memory. Okay, thanks very much. And let's hang around and whatever. Cheers. Thank you.